Wait, almost.
We'll open the hearing on House Bill 1132, prohibiting the display of certain flags in public schools and public charter schools, and establishing penalties for the display of prohibited flags. And I recognize the prime sponsor, Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, members of the House Education and Policy Administration Committee. For the record, my name is Lisa Freeman. I represent Belknap County, District 8, which is the towns of Belmont, Tilton, and Sanborn. Today, I bring before you House Bill 1132, which, as stated, prohibits the display of certain flags in public schools and public charter schools and establishes penalties for the display of such prohibited flags. This is a simple bill which determines that all classrooms will become neutral and non-judgmental. You will see in the bill that the flags that are allowed are the United States flag, the state of New Hampshire flag, the POW/MIA flag, any flags used for instruction in foreign languages, world geography, United States history classes, flags representing a branch of the United States military, an official city or town flag of a city or town located in New Hampshire. What this bill does is set a standards of penalties when this policy is violated, which is something we do not have in the current statute. What we have in 18917 right now shows no penalties for not following this policy. As you go down the list, you'll see what the violations are. We bring it to the local level, which is the school superintendent at the first complaint. The second violation would go to the superintendent and the school board, which maintains local control. And then the third violation will be the one that would go higher up the chain to the State Board of Education. Also, the monetary penalties relative to this would be determined by the school board and would never exceed $1,000 per violation. And that is the bill.
Thank you. Any questions? Representative Selig?
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking my question. So my children had marvelous experience at Moharmet Elementary School in Madbury, New Hampshire, where in addition to the U.S. flag and the New Hampshire flag, they also flew the school flag, which had a picture of a maple tree because they had a major sugar shack and a big sugaring operation, and they spent a lot of time using the sugar shack to teach writing skills, math skills, science, etc. They also had banners through the building that included instructional things on math and science and other kinds of things. So it seems to me that this bill would ban all of those things as well. Is that your intent?
Actually, it is not my intent. And you bring up, thank you, Representative. You bring up a very good point. I'd be willing to amend the bill to add just those things, the school flag, as well as any instructional flags for math or history or language art. I think those have a lot of validity and no, they shouldn't be prohibited.
Representative Hall?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for taking my question, Representative. In our high school, there were flags, national of different nations, representing, not from the history classes, but representing the student exchange. You know, so if you have a person from France and the French flag was up there, does that seem to be prohibited here? Because it's not really for instruction. It's not for world languages, not for geography, not for history. It's basically representing that students.
Well, thank you for the question, Representative. And it's not clear in this bill, you're correct, so I could absolutely amend it to add that because I do think that exchange programs are extremely important in our schools, so I could add that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Berkey?
No, that was my exact question.
Okay. Representative Nato?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question would be, would it be prohibitive of like religious flags, say the Confederate flag, which offends people, political flags, which also offends people, to that nature. I don't know, much more to lump sum all of this in, but to keep kids from being, I guess, combative in a heated way, could you amend something to prohibit something like that?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I think this bill in its entirety addresses all of those issues. It's pivotal that we create a neutral public school building, classrooms, and environment for children so they all feel welcome. There are going to be some children based on religion or personal ideology that may not feel comfortable with those flags. And I think it's incredibly respectful for us to consider that at any time in the classroom. Again, this bill just seeks to make classrooms a neutral environment where all children feel welcome and all children feel accepted. So yes, in fact, those types of flags would be prohibited.
Thank you.
Representative Cordell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. As you know, in Manchester, there's a huge population of English language learners that do activities within that program. I know they sometimes wear their native dress to class, or they'll do a day of where they bring in dishes from their country. And they also display their flags from their countries. Do you think that would be in violation of this? No.
No, I thank you for the question, Representative. No, I don't, because it's an instructional. You're teaching other students about a culture that you came from. I'm Italian. I'd wear the Italian flag if I could, but it's not. It wouldn't be accepted, and it looks silly. So I do understand. I do think that's pivotal in creating a welcoming community in our public schools. So no, that would not be prohibited.
Representative Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for taking my question. I'm just curious how this would stand up to or jive with the ruling from the Supreme Court regarding the divisive concepts violation, where even though it is uncomfortable, sometimes academically, there are subjects that are difficult to discuss, and some of those involve some of the very things that the member, Representative Nato, brought forward. And so in which case, I'm just curious as to how that stands.
Thank you for the question, Representative. I can't say that I've read the brief on that Supreme Court ruling, but I think at a local level, we have an opportunity to make our classrooms, once again, inviting and neutral to all students. So while I do respect everyone's First Amendment rights, my question would be, where does someone's rights start and mine end? So to that end, I haven't read the briefing on the Supreme Court ruling, but this bill just merely seeks to level the playing field and make every classroom and public school and public charter school in this state neutral.
Representative Bricky?
No.
Okay. Representative Selig?
Sorry, another question popped up for me. I
Please.
appreciate you taking my question. So I just think about, in middle school, I did a unit about science fiction as an instructor, where students created flags for these countries and planets that they developed as part of, so that's instructional, but again, it's not included with the list of types of instructional things. And you said you've been open to that, but if students are painting some of these other flags that Representative Nato identified, or that you might have mentioned in an art class or another class, can they then not be displayed as student work? I'm just trying to understand, what happens if a student paints one of those. Are they then not allowed to display their work the way that other students would be? Representative,
Thank you for the question. I would be really concerned if there was a student in an art class who painted a Confederate flag. So I don't think this bill would prohibit that, number one. Number two, I think if we wanted to, we could definitely split hairs and try to find things that would make this bill not palpable. But the bottom line is we have to start somewhere. And this is where I'm starting. And if things needed to be added or subtracted from it later on down the road, that's always an option. But I don't think our projects would fall under the category of prohibited items.
Follow-up?
Thank you. And just to clarify, in terms of envisioning a student, using the example you gave of of painting a Confederate flag. If I were teaching on, the Civil War, I could see a student doing an art project where they're painting both the Union flag and the Confederate flag as part of their project, and wouldn't want them to be penalized for displaying the accurate.
Again, I appreciate the question, and it's under instructional time, so I would say that no, those wouldn't be prohibited.
Representative Balboni.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just another pivot on an event that might take place in a school. Sports Day, sports teams' flags. They're not exactly instructional, but they're part of a celebration, whether you put in your Red Sox flag versus your Yankees flag. I mean, technically, those are prohibited.
Thank you for the question, Representative Balboni. I would put the Red Sox flag up and definitely not the Yankees flag. I think that might cause an issue all the way around. No, sports flags would not be prohibited, and I can also add that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Representative Tebow?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, once again, my name is James Tebow. I'm the state representative for Franklin and Northfield, and I'm here in support of HB 1132, which I'm also a co-sponsor of. The goal of this bill is really quite simple: to preserve a neutral environment in our schools and to ensure students are not isolated based on the politics of their instructors. The symbols like, I don't care if it's a pride flag or a MAGA flag, they indicate an instructor's political biases, and they will make students feel isolated and fear for retribution for engaging in freedom of speech. Students' rights on free speech have been protected for decades under Supreme Court cases like Tinker, but having a situation where a teacher's politics are very well known has a chilling effect on those free speech rights. While I'm not expecting teachers to be totally neutral, we're all human after all, we all have our biases, it is their obligation to have the most fair-handed and most balanced way possible when they're delivering curriculum, and plastering their politics on the wall is not an appropriate way to do that. This bill, in contrast to the one heard earlier prior to HB 1345, protects the flags that should be flown, the U.S. flag, the POW-MIA flag, the state flag, etc., while also prohibiting those political flags that may isolate students. Opponents may argue that this causes an unwelcoming environment for students, but it actually does the opposite. Many opponents want schools to be expressly welcoming for certain groups of students, even at the cost of being unwelcoming to others. They don't care about the student body as a whole, quite frankly. They care about pushing a political agenda in our schools, despite student and parental opposition. This bill puts a stop to that, respecting parents' authority to raise their children according to their values by preventing the use of political and ideological symbols in our schools, and maintains those carve-outs for flags that have real academic merit. Things that aren't curricular or don't play into the student environment in a positive way don't have any place in the classroom. I would even urge the committee to go further than the bill does in its current form and prohibit forms of these symbols that aren't necessarily traditional flags, such as magnets, stickers, posters, and other decorations that can also convey political messages in the classroom. Ultimately, the goal of this bill should be to ensure that school decorations focus on the academic enrichment of students, not on teacher advocacy or indoctrination. Thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Any questions? Representative Berkey?
So, thank you for taking my question. So you're only worrying about fair and non-discriminatory in public and public schools. You're not worried about certain groups being left out in private schools or other schools where there are still students who are being educated who could be worried about how somebody's flag is flown.
Could you clarify your question, Representative?
Yeah, so why is this just in public schools and public charter schools? Why aren't we?
Because I don't believe-
The last bill talked about, and we had a student here from Mount Royal who is a private school, so it talked about private schools. So why aren't we worried about that?
Representative, with respect, the last bill was a section of statute that already applies to private schools. This is a new section of statute, and
I understand.
with this bill, it is regulating what the legislature traditionally has jurisdiction to regulate, which is public school speech. If someone is sending their child to a private school, the assumption is that there's something about that private school that they want values-wise or education-wise. If they want to have symbols in their classrooms that convey some sort of political or ideological message, I don't see an issue with that as much, because it's much easier to take your child out of a private school and put them somewhere else than it is to take them out of a public school.
Okay.
Any other questions? Representative Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, I just want to make sure I understood your part of your testimony. You were stating that, if I thought I heard you correctly, in stating that something like the pride flag has a one political ideology versus leaning or another. So my question is, are you stating that that is a representation that nobody from a different party could?
I'm not saying it's partisan, but I am saying it's political. Those are two different distinctions.
Okay.
They're, just because something does not have the Republican elephant or the Democrat donkey on it, or has a candidate's name, doesn't mean it's not political in nature. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Beth Scare.
I'm Beth Scare from Nashua. I'm here in support of HB1132, which would effectively ban pride and trans flags from New Hampshire schools. In 2020, Nashua High School North Principal Nathan Burns approved the hanging of a 6-foot-long Pride Progress flag in a prominent place in the lobby of Nashua High North, where it hangs to this day. That flag includes pink and blue and white triangles representing transgenderism. It teaches the lie that girls can be boys and boys can be girls, which leads to taking health-damaging hormones and having healthy body parts removed. In 2023, under that same Pride Progress flag in Nashua High North, there was a display of many small flags representing many sexual and gender identities. There were flags for gay, bisexual, pansexual, omnisexual, polyamorous, non-binary, transgender, lesbian, aromantic, sapphic, demisexual, Achillean, xenogender, gender fluid, agender, asexual, demiromantic, and aroace. Nashua High North AP psychology teacher Paul Menard orchestrated the display of these flags. In an email to the principal, he said, "We would sell for $1 a card that says, 'I'm proud to be blank.' And people would write what they identify as, and we'll hang it on the wall outside the cafeteria near the pride flag." Mr. Menard was prompting kids to identify as polyamorous, meaning having multiple sexual partners, xenogender, which includes identifying as an animal or an inanimate object, and gender fluid, which means changing gender identities from one day to the next. It's perverse and insane stuff and proves that we are well down a slippery slope. In a school for first graders in Hudson, there is an 8-foot-long pride flag. It is so big that it hangs down 2 stories in a stairwell that children use to get to class, but where parents would be unlikely to see it. Why is there such a big pride flag in a school for first graders that should know nothing about sexual orientation? I've seen many other pride and trans flags in schools. I don't believe they should be there, especially since the same people who hang these flags would never hang a Christian flag or any flag representing traditional religious values. It's all one-sided. Why is that? Is it because they're trying to separate kids from their parents' traditional values? That is not what school should be about. Please vote ought to pass on HB 1132 to ban pride and trans flags from schools and help restore them to be a safe place for traditional religious families to send their children. And I have pictures of these flag displays to share with you.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Are there any other pink cards for 1132? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on 1132. That concludes our day. So we have one hearing in the morning and then we will exec 55 bills. Yeah, as many as we can get done.
Before we leave.